Hi, I'm Mr. Simons, and here we are continuing our walkthrough of the 2017 Economics HSC, and now we're up to question 24. Let's get started. Part A. Identify one type of unemployment that is present at full employment and one type of unemployment that is not. Okay, I'm sort of reading between the lines here, and when I'm looking at full employment, what happens when the economy is at the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment? What is happening at that full employment level? So we know that when an economy is at full employment, there is no cyclical unemployment. But there are a whole bunch of other different types of unemployment. For example, so this question is really saying, can you show that you know what happens at full employment at the NAIRU? Okay, this question says, explain how unemployment affects economic growth in an economy. So this might seem really obvious at the start, but if we're looking at 4 marks, we really need to go to some detail to show the marker we know what we're talking about, we know our theory, we know how it applies to the real world. So let me give you some ideas on how to approach it. Remember, this is not a model or perfect response. There's too many ways you could do it. All I'm doing is trying to provide you some ideas to steer you in the right direction. The writing and expression is up to you. So the short story here is that unemployment represents lost output in an economy. It represents underused resources. Here are all these people that could be productive and contributing to the economy, making things, selling things, providing services, but they're not. So the short story here is that unemployment restricts economic growth. It reduces how much an economy can grow. Let's think about how we could show that unemployment restricts economic growth. Let me give you some ideas. Well, the first idea is that unemployment leads to lower production. Because of this idea that we have underused resources, all of these people that could be working and doing things, and I've explained it already. So the idea is then unemployment leads to lower income for individuals, so these people that aren't working, and for the economy as a whole. And then if we have lower income and lower production, well, okay, that's going to reduce GDP, right? You could also mention here is that a discussion about derived demand. So if you've got unemployment, well then people aren't working, they demand less goods and services, which means firms need less workers to produce less goods and services, which in turn could increase unemployment as firms lay off staff. So that kind of relationship might be something you want to talk about. The other thing you could talk about is, because it says how it affects, not just negatively, you could flip the script a little bit. So if you think about it this way, unemployment will lead to greater government spending on unemployment benefits, right? The government has to pay more in welfare to cover all those people who are now without a job. So yes, that is going to actually stimulate aggregate demand and provide a short-term boost to economic growth. But overall, what you could also talk about is that if the government has to spend more of its limited resources, remember we're always talking about economics, limited resources on welfare, it can't spend extra money on other areas, right? So in effect, it's kind of paying for welfare, but it it can't spend that money then on infrastructure or education, on labour market training, on all sorts of things that could then boost aggregate supply and increase the productive capacity of the economy. Here we are at part C in question 24, and I think this is a very difficult question. So if we read this question, it says, contrast the use of fiscal policy for an economy at the NAIRU with its use at an economy above the NAIRU. So this requires quite a sophisticated knowledge of how we can decrease unemployment and how we can further decrease unemployment at the NAIRU. So in terms of thinking about it, let's accept that this is a challenging question and it's worth a decent amount of marks too. So again, not providing with a perfect response, but here are some ideas about how you might tackle this question. So you need to think about 1. So let's start with the scenario where the economy is above the NAIRU, okay? And remember, our focus here is on fiscal policy. If you start talking about monetary policy, micro reform, all these things, that's not going to help you in addressing this particular question. If the economy is above the NAIRU, that means the economy's rate of unemployment is above the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. So this means that if the economy is above the NAIRU, that means that there is still cyclical unemployment. Oh, okay, so if there's cyclical unemployment, we want to get rid of that. What if we just used expansionary fiscal policy? What if we ran a budget deficit or reduced the surplus, increased aggregate demand? We could reduce cyclical unemployment, and bring unemployment down to the NAIRU. Let me give you a few points here. The government could use fiscal policy to stimulate the economy, so to give aggregate demand a boost and reduce the rate of unemployment down to the NAIRU by eliminating cyclical unemployment. And in terms of how fiscal policy could be used, well, we're talking about expansionary fiscal, where government spending exceeds taxation revenue. This could be a deficit or it could be a smaller surplus. So this is our first situation, if the economy is above the NAIRU. Now let's go to the second situation, which I think is a little bit more complicated. If the economy is at the NAIRU, well then there is no cyclical unemployment. So if we just use expansionary fiscal policy, that's just going to increase aggregate demand. And when companies look for extra workers, they're just going to steal them from another company by offering higher wages. And that's going to be inflationary. So let's put down some points here to try and explain or indicate our knowledge about this situation. So that what happens is that if the government uses expansionary fiscal policy, so government spending greater than taxation revenue, this is going to increase aggregate demand, increase demand for workers, but all that's going to happen is that companies are going to have to steal workers from another company with higher wages because there are no other workers just lurking around the workforce who are suitable. And that's going to lead to higher levels of inflation in an economy. So if the economy is at the NAIRU, the government has to do something else. So instead, to go lower than the NAIRU, the government has to work out how it could use fiscal policy to increase the size of the workforce and to boost aggregate supply. That's the only way to reduce unemployment further. So if you think about what types of unemployment are present at the NAIRU, we've got structural unemployment. So if the government could reduce the number of structurally unemployed, then that could reduce the NAIRU. And the best way to do that would be to retrain those with the structurally unemployed. So what we're doing, we're going to use fiscal policy not to stimulate the economy, but instead to run retraining programs, labour market programs, workforce programs to give the structurally unemployed the right skills to get into the workforce, to take some of the, to create extra jobs, people to take those jobs, and to boost aggregate supply. But our key distinction is this. What do we do with fiscal policy when the economy, when the unemployment rate is greater than the NAIRU? What do we do with fiscal policy when the economy is at the NAIRU? This is a complex question. I encourage you to watch this bit again and give it a go yourself. And please leave a comment if you've got any questions. Okay, thanks for watching. This wraps up our series of walkthrough videos on the short answer section of the 2017 New South Wales Economics HSC exam. Leave us a comment if you've got any confusion. Subscribe. We're going to get on to the essays next. And as always, thanks very much for watching.